Hello, my name's Matthew Linn and I'm presenting today on networked professional learning, more specifically networked professional learning in regional communities. So just a bit of a run through about what we're going to discuss today. We're looking at networked professional learning, and first of all we're going to introduce networked professional learning, what it is, how networked professional learning has changed over the years, and then we're going to move into why. Why should we look at teaching and network professional learning? Why should educators be considering network professional learning? What are the benefits of it? And why is it so important? We're then going to move into looking at some of the policies specifically directed at South Australia and also government schools in South Australia, Department of Education schools, the policies that are put in place for schools under that banner, and the requirements for teachers and staff alike underneath that. From there we're going to go into some staff and team research. I've been doing a bit of research within my rural context in regional South Australia and have a bit of a look at how the professional learning habits of staff in my context have been affected and are sort of continuing and evolving over time. And then what we're going to do is we're going to analyse some of those results, have a look at it, and see what's sort of pertinent to my context, and also then starting to move into some strategies and perspectives, perhaps looking beyond what we already do and moving forward into network professional learning, and I guess looking out and seeing what's being done around the world and how professional learning is being managed in this day and age. And lastly, looking at support. What's a sustainable approach for professional learning moving forward? How can I support my school in my context, particularly in regional South Australia, and looking at other regional schools, and how can they be supported to work together to collaborate for a sustainable professional learning culture moving forward? So, how do we define network professional learning? What is it? Professional learning is the formal or informal learning experiences undertaken by teachers and school leaders that improve their individual professional practice and a school's collective effectiveness as measured by improved student learning, engagement with learning, and well-being. At its most effective, professional learning develops individual and collective capacity across the teaching profession to address current and future challenges. Now that was from the Australian Charter for the Professional Learning of Teachers and School Leaders, from the Australian Institute of Teachers, Teaching and School Leadership, and is very, very relevant. That was written back in 2012, but really in a nutshell explains the importance of professional learning for educators. And so following on now from the definition provided by the Australian Charter for Professional Learning of Teachers and School Leaders, we are now going to look into some of the definitions for network learning and network professional learning provided in the readings of the Networked Educator course. The first definition we're going to look at is one in Shrewer's 2014 article, and it refers to some research done by Goodyear, Banks, Hodgson and McConnell. And they explained that network learning involved the use of ICTs, or information and communication technology, to promote collaborative connections between learners, their tutors or instructors, and learning resources. Interestingly, following into another article, Mackey and Evans in 2011 in their article then concurred. Network learning has been accompanied by a growing interest in approaches that employ communication technologies. We're seeing this again, and this was an earlier article. Employing communication technologies to foster collaborative processes, interaction, and the social construction of knowledge. So once again, that reference to technologies. Lastly, another one here is from Van Vase et al. In just last year, 2016. They explained that professional development is no longer regarded as an individual endeavour, interestingly, but is influenced by the people a teacher interacts with and the quality of these interactions. Therefore, they were arguing that a teacher interacts within a network of people, and obviously within a medium of technology and things like that, as we've just heard from the other authors, containing different relationships of a differing quality. But each of those relationships, regardless of the quality, can contribute to a teacher's professional development. And I think really that starts really encapsulating the essence of network professional learning. So moving on now, we're going to look at why. We've looked at what professional learning is, particularly network professional learning. We're starting to look at some of the definitions around that, but why? Why is it so important for educators to look at this? And the Australian Institute of Teaching and School Leadership has put together a really fantastic video that sums it up. So moving straight after that fantastic video, which really does encapsulate why professional learning. And it also encapsulates and explains why policy is so important. And that's why, moving on, we can then start to see what the Department of Education has put in place in terms of policy. So the Department of Education in terms of professional learning has actually got one policy, and it comes under the performance and development policy. It's under the one banner, but professional learning is explicitly written into this policy, and it's also explained in more detail under the guidelines that then come with the policy. And the guidelines basically run through the work of all employees and how important that is to ensure that the professional learning and that everyone who works within this enormous Department of Education has the opportunity to be able to build on what they do, but also to engage in professional learning experiences. We're going to look a little more into what that involves in just a minute. So first of all, the priorities of the policies and the guidelines that the Department of Education has done, and that was written back in 2014, but they've actually got a renewal scheduled at the moment. So I believe it was supposed to be started, and I think they're currently reviewing the policy. But at the moment, in the current version, the priorities of the policy and the guidelines are as follows. First of all, one priority for the Department of Education is that they engage employees through ongoing professional learning, shared practice and professional relationships. Secondly, another priority is establishing and maintaining professional relationships and collaborative networks, once again highlighting the importance of these professional relationships and also the networking opportunities that come with it, particularly with a focus on them being collaborative. Shared learning and practice with others. And lastly, seeking and receiving feedback openly and respectfully with colleagues. So that's just four of many of the priorities of the policies and guidelines that I've just selected, but really do encapsulate the importance of professional learning, and it's actually been made policy to ensure that every employee and every staff member throughout the Department of Education and Child Development has the opportunity to engage in professional learning. And we would then hope that that would then follow through to their students and those who they work with. Okay, so following on from looking at DECT policy, we're now going to look at the Teacher Registration Board of South Australia requirements for professional learning in terms of registration. Now, interestingly enough, following on from the Department of Education and Child Development's policy, it's actually policy for professional learning to be considered as part of the teacher registration process in South Australia. So regardless of whether you're a teacher in the government system, or whether you're a teacher in Catholic education or as part of the independent schools, or anyone who wants to renew their registration for teaching in South Australia must have undertaken a minimum of 60 hours of professional learning, all of which has been referenced to the Australian Professional Standards for Teachers, and all completed during their current term of registration prior to renewal. It also must be kept as a record, and all professional learning experiences must be recorded with supporting evidence prior to the renewal of registration. And I've included the flyer to the left there just to demonstrate how well laid out the policy is for the Teachers Registration Board and how important it is to ensure that that's an integral part of the registration process. It certainly makes it very clear how important professional learning is to the teaching profession and the impact it can have on student education. So now we've had a really good look at the policies and also the requirements for registration as a teacher in South Australia. I really want to hone in and have a little look closer to home for myself, but also analyse a little more how do teachers in a rural South Australian context like mine access their professional learning opportunities. And I've done a bit of research. First of all, I just wanted to demonstrate some of the different types of professional learning opportunities that are available to teachers in my rural context, and just give a bit of a run through about what's involved there. In my particular context, a number of teachers are undergoing further study. Also, working with colleagues, being in a country community, a very good sense of community, so colleagues like to work together in person. A number of teachers look at different opportunities such as podcasts, online forums and video and teleconferencing. But the local community and certainly partnership learning groups are something that are quite popular within our Mid-North partnership. Blogs and Twitter as well as social networking is also popular. And then obviously a more traditional format of conferences and things like that, as well as sort of school-based training and development programs. So that's just a bit of a nutshell about some of the options and opportunities that are available to teachers in my rural context. And we're going to look a little closer through some surveys in a minute about how they're actually managed and how teachers use each of those opportunities. So, as part of the research and obtaining feedback, using SurveyMonkey, the SurveyMonkey platform, it's something we use a lot in our school environment. It's fantastic. I worked with it and surveyed a number of teachers, 13 actually, in my school environment. They're a great group and they were really willing to work with me on this. And they have a diverse range of experience. Being in a rural high school in quite a popular area, it's a beautiful country area. We do have a diverse range of experience and also a diverse range of backgrounds, and it's fantastic. And I was able to obtain these teachers' feedback through SurveyMonkey on the different types of online and offline network professional learning opportunities that they access and utilised on a regular basis. So as you can see there on the left, there's a brief snapshot within that little map there on what the survey looked like, and there were a number of different questions that I posed to them looking at their network professional learning context. Now, interestingly enough, when we look at the results, it's actually what I would say is fairly reflective of a rural community and also the resources available to a rural community. When we have a look along the bottom there in terms of the different types of professional learning experiences, and then we sort of see the scale of them, it's very interesting. Postgraduate study, there were a few there, and it's interesting to see that's lower. It's harder to access. You have to be an external student when you're in a country area. Very interestingly, one of the highest professional learning opportunities is come as conferences, and I find that very interesting. Also, local colleagues, extremely high. Podcasts, not so much. Online forums, around about 55%. Video and teleconferences, not being used to a great degree. Professional associations are really quite high though. So obviously looking at some holiday programs and things like that, as well as different training opportunities that professional associations offer. Social networking, actually under 50%, surprising. Blogs, partnership learning groups, so very high, which I would agree is a reflective of our area and the partnership learning groups that go on in our context. Books and digital print still quite high. Local community also very high. Guest speakers as well, which would probably normally be part of a school-based training and development program, also extremely high. And school-arranged training and development as well, which is interesting for our context. And then also another there, or a couple of others. So when we start looking at that in more detail and we actually break down the 13 respondents, we can see quite clearly how that's broken down. So once again, just a little more granular. The postgraduate study, just a couple of people undergoing that. 12 of the 13 participating in conferences on a regular basis, which is interesting, very much in person. Professional associations at 8 there, partnership learning groups, 10 people being involved in that, guest speakers another 10. So it's very interesting, very in-person context in terms of network professional learning at this point in time, which is interesting. There's a few who are participating in social networking, things like that, but it's actually interesting because it's under half. Blogs, online forums at 7 people, only 3 accessing podcasts for various bits and pieces. It's interesting to look at the diversity in terms of my context and how my teachers are accessing, and my team of teachers are accessing professional learning. So as I've been looking through this, it's very interesting to look at the difficulties with traditional network learning. And I would say, just from looking at the results that I've got in front of me here and what we've just shared, is that a lot of the professional learning that's being accessed by my context at the moment and those teachers in my context is quite traditional. And it's interesting because I actually agree with then what comes back from the research, and just looking at a quote here from Lieberman and Mace. Straight away, teachers have long perceived professional development, though well-intentioned, to be fragmented, disconnected and irrelevant to the real problems of their classroom practice. And it's interesting, just through the discussions that have opened up from this survey and the team I've been working with, is that although we seem to be having an enormous scope in terms of guest speakers, in terms of working in-person traditional formats of training and development, it's interesting that that perception is actually, though well-intentioned, so well-meaning, is actually slightly disconnected and irrelevant to the real issues that they deal with on a daily basis. And following up from that, it's quite interesting as well. In 2014, Shrews in the article here mentions that formal learning activities like training and workshops are often seen as less effective due to the fact trainings are too far away from daily practice and teachers find it difficult to transform the insights gained in formal trainings to concrete expertise usable in their daily teaching. It's just interesting, and I'm finding this fascinating because it really gives me some groundwork to work on with my context moving forward. And I find it very interesting how our traditional training and development may not actually be setting up our teachers potentially moving forward. So very, very interesting. So what I wanted to share with you now is a fantastic sort of infographic that EdSurge, and EdSurge, if you haven't seen it already, is a fantastic online blog with all manner of information. But they've come up with this infographic that really just encapsulates what we've just been speaking about. And I really want to sort of, I guess, enhance a little more my explanation in terms of the new era of professional development. And this infographic explains it really well. And on the left of this infographic, what we can see very clearly is how teachers are learning in the past, and also in my context, I'd say how we're still continuing to learn on quite a regular basis. And from what we've seen in my results, it's very clear that day-long workshops, observations, guest speakers, professional learning communities, whilst good, absolutely, there's definitely a lot of value there. It's interesting to see how actually professional development is evolving. And it's also interesting to see, and this is where I think my context is going to have to start shifting, is that professional development is becoming more and more personalised by the day. And when we start looking at this infographic, what we can see is that learning in the new age, here, as is labelled there, can become personalised, relevant and useful. Because what happens is, all of a sudden, is you can engage in things that are relevant to you. Staff can learn anywhere, anytime, and we can access all of this amazing information, all of these amazing resources that actually are relevant to us in our own context. Rather than once again just having a look back at the last point that we were talking about, where it's sort of well-meaning activities but disconnected and irrelevant. It's actually within personalised PD, well, the only one to blame is yourself if it's not relevant to you, because you're the one undergoing and selecting the type of professional learning you're undergoing. So very, very different to the traditional format of professional learning. And I think just that infographic here in front of us really explains that very, very well when we look at how teachers learned in the past on the left, and then start moving to the right where we see the changes in the accessibility of professional learning and how personalised it can be. So addressing the difficulties, looking at my context and starting to really analyse what's going on. First of all, I think there needs to be a strong leadership role in building awareness of the numerous networked professional opportunities available to teachers. And it's just interesting looking at the data that we've had and the sheer, I guess, the vast majority of teachers being involved in more in-person T&Ds, more traditional formats of professional learning. I think it enhances that we need to start looking at opportunities for staff in a rural context, so it's not isolating. So there are these opportunities to access, I guess, on a world level, professional learning. And what that'll mean is we are in a regional area, so therefore just basic services can be a lot harder to get to, and we're doing a lot of work at the moment around getting decent quality internet, for example, just so we can start to access these online learning opportunities. And there'll be things that we start to really bolster now, particularly when we can just bring results like this together and actually see what's going on. I also really want to encourage collaborating and supporting with staff teams in our own context to engage and share together. I think this is what this is all about, and I'm hoping that through online learning that the walls start to come down, because you're actually doing things collaboratively, and it's not intimidating in the way that it traditionally has been. And then before you know it, you're back into school, you're working with your team, you're engaging and sharing together, just like you have been online, and before you know it, the capacity builds and doors start to open. And this is really what I'm looking forward to within my context. And this was a quote that I just found really, really pertinent from Lieberman and Mace in this example. Even the act of struggling together at the same time in the same ways help teachers to master new practices. Fantastic. And it's interesting, just reflecting on online learning and just the change in professional learning and network professional learning, and how my context has sort of currently in a traditional sense, a lot of it, and we do have obviously a few trailblazers as well, which I'm very excited about. I'm going to be working with those people to start looking at how we can move forward in terms of this professional learning opportunities. But now looking at the value of online, and this is just a fantastic quote from Mackey and Evans that I think explains the value of online learning. The sense of autonomy was evident in their choices. This is teachers undergoing online learning. And the level of interaction online and offline, and in the way they connected the theoretical and practical ideas from coursework to their own work context. They were focused on their own learning needs and were not looking for social engagement or sustained connections with others in the online environment. Their pragmatic online connection served a purpose, diversifying their networks and opening up new possibilities for learning. But these connections were different to the sustained interactions which occurred in their communities of practice. Teachers appeared to connect, blend and design their own learning experiences in ways that dismissed issues of transfer and instead demonstrated permeability and connectivity between the two communities. I just find that really, really interesting, and just that autonomy that online learning and networked professional learning creates really is quite empowering. Okay, to finish here, I really do want to talk about now supporting and nurturing our positive professional learning networks. And it's very interesting just from surveying and working in my context to look at the different types of professional learning that's being accessed. And I'm certainly very excited moving forward with a number of the opportunities there too. And we have a great staff and a very collaborative staff. And I'm looking forward to actually the opportunities that will be opened up as a result of really starting to move into online learning. I've got a number of champions that I'm keen to work with. And in a nutshell, I think this is what it's all about. This is from the Australian Institute of Teaching and School Leadership. Professional learning will be most effective when it takes place within a culture where teachers and school leaders expect and are expected to be active learners, to reflect on, receive feedback on, and improve their pedagogical practice, and by doing so, to improve student outcomes. And really, I think that's what it's all about. And just this study itself has been fantastic for me moving forward. And I'm really looking forward to studying this more as I move on. But I think this analysis into professional learning is extremely valuable for educators and education as a whole in Australia. Thank you.